Racist cop laughs at black woman during traffic stop, panics when she says, "I'm your judge tomorrow." The Georgia sky was painted in charcoal, lit only by distant street lamps and the occasional flicker of passing headlights. It was a Tuesday night just past 11:30, and the city had slipped into its usual quiet exhaustion. In the suburbs, most homes were dark. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then silence resumed its dominance. A black Lexus rolled calmly down the nearly empty avenue. Inside was Alicia Monroe, a black woman in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in a navy blue business suit. Her hair was neatly pinned back, and she wore reading glasses that gave her a certain calm gravity. She looked tired, not from the day alone, but from the weight of being constantly vigilant, of always having to prove that she belonged. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with a practiced composure. She was driving under the speed limit. Not too slow, not fast either. Just enough to not attract attention. Or so she thought. Out of nowhere, flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. The siren blared once, short and sharp like a warning shot. Alicia sighed, glancing quickly at her dashboard. Everything was in order. No speeding, no missed signals, no expired tags. Still, she pulled over calmly, her hazard lights blinking like a heartbeat under pressure. The police cruiser stopped a few feet behind her. A moment later, a white man stepped out of the vehicle. He walked slowly, confidently, one hand resting on his belt near his holstered weapon. His uniform was crisp, but the look in his eyes was not that of a public servant. It was that of a man who had stopped too many people who looked like Alicia and had come to expect the worst from them. His name tag read Officer Derek Malloy. He knocked on the window with the back of his knuckle 3 firm taps. "Roll down the window, please." Alicia lowered it halfway. "Good evening, officer. What seems to be the issue?" The officer tilted his head and gave her a smirk. Well, a black woman driving a Lexus this yours, ma'am." His tone was thick with mockery. He emphasized the word ma'am as if it were a joke. Alicia looked at him evenly. "Yes, it is registered under my name." He peered into the car and sniffed lightly as if searching for something more incriminating than a driver running late on a weeknight. "You were going a bit too slow for my liking, almost like you were trying to avoid being noticed. That makes me nervous. See, we got a lot of suspicious activity in this area lately." He leaned forward. "License and registration, please." Without a word, Alicia reached into her glove compartment and retrieved the requested documents. Her movements were slow, deliberate, measured. She had rehearsed these gestures in her mind countless times. She knew not to move too quickly, not to argue, not to give them any excuse. The officer took the papers from her hand, brushing her fingers, as he did then look down at the name on the license. Alicia Monroe. He repeated it under his breath, chuckling as he did. Then he flipped over the registration and found the same name. "You know, I gotta say, this is a first. Usually folks like you don't have their names on cars like this." Alicia remained still, her expression unreadable. "Folks like me, sir." "Yeah, you know, working class or not working at all, sorry, just being honest." Then he saw something. In the front flap of her wallet, partially visible, was a small badge. He leaned closer, squinting. "What is that? Is that some kind of novelty thing you play a lawyer on TV or something?" Alicia calmly lifted the badge from her wallet and held it between 2 fingers. It was polished and clear. Superior Court of Fulton County. Underneath the seal was engraved Judge Alicia Monroe. "I am a sitting judge in the Fulton County Superior Court, and if I am not mistaken, Officer Malloy, you have a scheduled appearance in front of my bench tomorrow morning." Officer Malloy stared at the badge. His smirk vanished. For a moment he did not speak. His eyes darted between the badge and her face, as if trying to determine whether this was a trick, a dream, or a terrible mistake. Wait, what you're saying, you? I am saying that I recognized your name from the docket as soon as you stepped up to my car, and now I will have to enter tonight's stop into official record because you have made this encounter a matter of judicial interest. He took a step back as if the badge itself had burned his hand. He looked behind him at his patrol car as though seeking escape. But there was nowhere to run. Ma'am, I mean, Your Honor, I didn't mean any disrespect. I didn't know who you were. That is exactly the problem, Alicia replied evenly. You would have treated any other black woman exactly the same way, wouldn't you? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. This stop is over, Alicia said calmly. I suggest you return to your vehicle. I will see you in court. She rolled up her window and signaled to merge back into traffic. As the Lexus pulled away into the night, Derek Malloy stood frozen by the side of the road, caught in a moment. He would never forget a moment that tore open the thin veil between power and accountability. The night was quiet again, but the balance had shifted forever. The courthouse stood tall in downtown Atlanta, its facade of stone and glass rising like a fortress between the people and the law. On most mornings, it buzzed with lawyers in sharp suits, defendants in cheap button-ups, and court staff weaving through narrow corridors like clockwork. But today, there was an uneasy stillness in the Superior Court of Fulton County, courtroom 3B. It was not the kind of stillness born from silence, but the kind that creeps in before something heavy is about to fall. Inside the courtroom, Officer Derek Malloy sat at a wooden bench reserved for internal affairs hearings. His uniform looked stiffer than usual, as if freshly ironed in desperation. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers twitching in cycles. His face was pale, lips pressed together like he was physically holding back the wave of regret crashing against his ribs. He looked around the room. Only a few people were present. An internal affairs investigator, a department observer, a recorder, and at the front, the seat of judgment waited, high and solemn. Then she entered. Judge Alicia Monroe walked in through the side door with her robe already on. Her presence filled the room without needing to say a word. Her expression was unreadable but not cold. It was composed, deliberate. She sat, adjusted her robe, and looked at the man in front of her. Court is now in session, Judge Monroe said calmly. This is a formal review hearing for Officer Derek Malloy regarding accusations of professional misconduct filed by the Internal Oversight Division and witnessed firsthand by this court. Malloy looked down at the desk as if it might split open and swallow him whole. His badge number had already been read into the record. The charges were clear and unambiguous. Excessive profiling, misuse of authority, behavioral conduct unbecoming of law enforcement, racial bias suspected and documented through multiple civilian complaints and body cam footage. Officer Malloy had never appeared in this courtroom before as a defendant. He had walked these halls many times escorting detainees, enforcing orders, speaking to bailiffs with a casual arrogance. Now he was stripped of the shield of his role. All that was left was the man. Judge Monroe leaned slightly forward and looked directly at him. I want to be very clear, she said. What happened last night was not about me. It was not personal, but it was telling. It exposed a habit, a pattern that has repeated itself with too many others, and it was the final straw. Malloy tried to speak, his voice cracked halfway through. Your Honor, I just want to say that I didn't mean anything by it. I didn't know who you were. That is precisely the point, Judge Monroe said, cutting him off. You should not have to know who someone is to treat them with dignity. Her voice did not rise, it did not shake, but it carried weight. More than anger, more than accusation, it carried truth. I have reviewed multiple incidents tied to your conduct, continued Monroe. In each case, a pattern emerges. You disproportionately pull over minority drivers. You show an alarming tendency to escalate minor encounters. You make assumptions based on appearance. You laugh when asked for clarification. You belittle people on the roadside where there are no witnesses. He shifted uncomfortably, eyes wet, but not from tears of remorse. It was the fear of having his power questioned for the first time in years. Your behavior last night may have been impulsive, but it was not isolated. That is what concerns this court. Silence again. The investigator from Internal Affairs then rose and read aloud excerpts from past reports. A black man pulled over for air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. A Latina mother detained for 15 minutes while her children cried in the back seat. A teenager accused of being suspicious while walking home from work. The officer in all reports, Derek Malloy. Each sentence felt like a hammer slamming against Malloy's chest. One by one, they built a wall around him. Words he could not refute because they were his own actions. Then Alicia Monroe spoke again. Let me tell you what I saw last night, Officer Malloy. I saw a man who assumed that a black woman behind the wheel of a nice car must be lying or stealing or faking. I saw a man who laughed when confronted with education. I saw a man who didn't even bother hiding his prejudice. Malloy's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He had no defense left, only excuses he knew would sound hollow. But more importantly, she continued, I also saw something else. I saw fear, not mine, yours. The moment you realized I had power, you didn't fear you had done wrong, you feared consequences. And that tells me you are not ready to wear that badge. The courtroom was frozen. The only movement was the slow scribbling of the court reporter's pen. Officer Malloy, I am recommending immediate suspension from duty pending full disciplinary review. You will be required to undergo racial sensitivity training, psychological evaluation, and probationary monitoring for the next 12 months. Malloy's face fell. A full suspension, a public record, an open wound in his career. And if you cannot meet those standards, said Monroe, then you are not fit to serve the public in any capacity, not now, not ever. He nodded slowly, shame clinging to him like cold sweat. This court is adjourned, Judge Monroe said as she stood and walked out, her robe trailing behind her like a banner of justice, not vengeance but integrity. As she left, she did not look back. Malloy remained in his seat, surrounded by silence, and the heavy truth that for the first time in his career someone had looked him in the eye and held him accountable. He was not used to being seen, he was not used to being powerless, but now he understood. Weeks passed. The case that began with flashing lights on a quiet Georgia road had become more than just an internal matter. It had sparked murmurs in the press, discussions at town halls, and long, difficult conversations across police precincts and community centers alike. People began sharing their stories. Stories like Alicia's, stories that were often dismissed, buried, or ignored. But now, with a judge's voice behind them, they resonated louder. Inside her chambers, Judge Alicia Monroe sat at her desk surrounded by case files. But her mind wasn't focused on paperwork. The memory of that night, of the traffic stop, had carved itself into her consciousness. It wasn't the first time she had been profiled. It likely wouldn't be the last. But it was the first time her authority had collided directly with the very prejudice she had spent a lifetime navigating. She looked up at the framed photo on her shelf. Her father in his postal uniform, standing proudly beside the mailbox of their first home. He had been the first in their family to work for the government. She remembered what he used to tell her when she came home crying after school. They fear your mind more than your fists, so sharpen your mind, baby girl. Sharpen it like a blade. A knock on the door. Come in, she said. It was Melanie, her clerk, a young woman barely out of law school, eyes wide with both admiration and concern. Judge, she said, the review board released their final report. It's public now. Officer Malloy's suspension has been upheld. His badge has been stripped. He won't be returning to the force. Alicia nodded slowly. There was no satisfaction in her face. No celebration. Just a quiet breath. Thank you, Melanie. Melanie hesitated, then asked, softly, do you think anything's really going to change? Alicia looked at her for a long moment. Her fingers folded slowly on the desk. Change doesn't begin in courtrooms, she said. It begins when someone who never expected to be seen is finally heard. What happened wasn't justice in its entirety. It was accountability. That's the first step. Melanie nodded, a small light of understanding flickering in her eyes. Then she excused herself, leaving Alicia alone once more. That night, Alicia didn't drive home. She walked. Downtown Atlanta was alive with its usual pulse. Laughter spilling from restaurants, cars honking in the distance, sirens wailing faintly somewhere else. But in the noise, she found clarity. She passed a mural painted on a brick wall. A black child holding a book in one hand and scales of justice in the other. Above it were the words, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." Alicia paused before it, feeling the weight of the words. She had grown up in a world that did not expect her to reach where she stood now. She had been told she was too loud, too serious, too ambitious. But here she was, a judge, a voice, a mirror to a system that rarely looked at itself. Across the city, in a small rented apartment, Derek Malloy sat on the edge of a worn-out couch staring at the television. It was muted. The headlines at the bottom of the screen told his story in 2 lines. Suspended, disgraced, under review. He wasn't angry anymore. He was ashamed. For the first time, he saw himself not as a man wronged, but as a man who had walked blind for too long. His power had shielded him. His uniform had made him feel untouchable. But it had also made him numb. He remembered Alicia's eyes. Not cold, not hateful, but piercing, holding a mirror to him, not to destroy but to expose. He looked down at the community volunteer flyer sitting on his coffee table. Court-ordered service. He had thought of it as a punishment, but now it felt like something else. A beginning. Alicia returned home late. Her dog greeted her with a soft bark, tail wagging. She poured herself tea, sat on the porch, and let the night wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel burdened. She felt present. The robe she wore in court didn't define her. The badge didn't define Malloy. What mattered were the choices made when power stood face to face with humanity. Sometimes justice didn't roar. Sometimes it whispered. In a courtroom, on a roadside, in the pause between a question and its answer. And sometimes that whisper changed everything. If the story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes to a deeper truth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We create powerful, emotional stories that reflect real struggles, real injustice, and the strength it takes to rise above. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that might change how you see the world. And if this message spoke to you, share it, like it, and leave a comment. Your voice matters here. This is more than a channel. This is a journey, and we're just getting started.